So everyone's talking about Erling Haaland, the Norwegian soccer player, his 2 goals, this historic upset of the world order in soccer, like Brazil is out of the World Cup. And absolutely, it's been a remarkable story. If you saw that game, really amazing, honestly, from all aspects. But from my perspective, it's not actually his story that caught my attention, because I've spent over 20 years working with leadership teams and organizations and governments and nonprofits. And one of the things that I've seen over and over is this, that we're fascinated with heroes. We love the person who finishes the play, who dunks the final basket, kicks the final goal, like the one who's on stage holding up the trophy, right? And they get the attention, which is fine. But every time I see that, I always wonder, what made that actually possible? Because it's not possible that one person scores 2 goals against Brazil all by themselves, right? They have to have had something like an entire team making those moments possible. And so if Haaland wasn't really the reason that Norway won, not by himself, what was the reason? And I think that there's a really clear story behind that. That's what I want to talk about today. So the headlines, they make it look really simple, right? Haaland scored twice in the closing minutes, and then the game was over, and, history, and they did the row. It's just fascinating. You really should watch the game if you haven't seen it. But soccer, football, whichever word you call it, it never works that simply, right? Because before those goals actually happened, there was something a lot bigger than only one player going on, right? Norway, I'm going to say they not only survived, but they thrived in that, right? So if we talk about just the survival aspect, Brazil earned an early penalty. And if that ball went in, it would have been an entirely different game. But the goalkeeper, or Jan Nilan, he saves it. Now, if you think about it, and if you saw that, that was amazing too. So if you think about what that one moment actually does, it keeps the score level, just factually. But it also changed something, I think, that wasn't really visible. It changed what everybody thought was possible. Because I think up to that point, it's oh my gosh, not only a penalty kick, but Brazil, of course they're going to get it. So instead of unraveling the whole situation, Norway kind of just settled in, and they stayed organized, and they started, nobody panicked because that happened. No one person on that team tried to become a hero. And I think that's really the point, right? Everybody just kept doing their job. And not only do I find that fascinating, but if you watch the team, it almost looked like a synergy, this dance between them. Their passing is amazing, their teammanship, their communication. And I think really because not one person was trying to shine, these individuals that did shine really made the game pop, but they didn't do it alone. And if that one mistake against Brazil could change anything, it's that the team just deepened their trust in one another. And that actually, especially, you can imagine how high pressure that situation is, right? That's a lot harder than it sounds to trust one another. So if we bring that back to groups and group dynamics, one thing that I've noticed over the years is that I think that we misunderstand the word teamwork, what it actually means. So when I ask people, they usually say something like, we help each other. Well, yes, of course we do. But I don't think that's what the sense of teamwork is. Or we work well together. Okay, we collaborate. Those are descriptors. But I think that helping someone usually happens after the problem. But teamwork, that cohesion, that starts earlier, and that's actually at a very energetic level. The teamwork itself, the team cohesion, I'm going to call it, it creates conditions where other people on the team can succeed and bring their best to the forefront even when they don't need the help yet. And those are very different things. So if you think about Haaland's goals, right, they are absolutely beautiful. The one where it just is a kick and right in the corner, or the header, which was amazing. But those opportunities for him to do that, they didn't just appear out of nowhere. That was all set up. Norway defended together. They stayed compact, and they trusted themselves and how they were moving through that game. And when substitutions came in, everyone adjusted, right? So Coach Stula Solbakken, he made important halftime changes and made a difference, right? Andreas Schjelderup entered the match. He assisted in both of those goals. And if you think about that for a minute, those assists would never have happened unless the whole team created the space for them, unless all of them worked for that to happen and come to that point. And that's what I'm talking about, because the goals themselves, obviously, they belong to Haaland. But the opportunity, that was created by everyone. And so he was a part of that entire team, that entire system that was moving. Yeah? And I think that that distinction matters way beyond football, soccer, really any specific field. It's a distinction about how organizations, how families, how relationships themselves organize themselves, how true they are within themselves. And when they have that trust, when they have that cohesion, organizations, families, relationships, they're successful. Like, that really is what makes the difference. And I thought it was so cool to see it portrayed on a soccer field. And it makes me really curious about something. Have you ever been part of a team where someone else received all of the credit? Yeah. And you were genuinely happy that they did. And you didn't disappear in them getting the credit. But you knew what everyone had contributed, like the person who was getting the credit, but you also were very aware of all of the effort that went in all the way around that one particular person. And if that's the case, if you've experienced that, I'd love to hear your story in the comments if you'd share that, because I think that those situations are things that we don't talk about often. We talk about the things that bother us. We talk about the people who did great, but I rarely hear people talking about the trust within the collective. And that's really what I'm talking about here. And I think that your answers to those questions is something important, because then we can all understand what success looks like in action, like in a real life situation. So I'm curious about something. Have you ever been part of a team where somebody else received all the credit and you were genuinely happy that they did, but it wasn't because you weren't part of it or that you disappeared, but you were aware that that person was maybe at the forefront, but they had this whole system, this whole cohesive collective around them and underneath them, if you will, that had brought them to that point. And if you've experienced that, I'd love for you to share that story in the comments, because I think that those real life scenarios are important for us to hear and know that they exist, because I think we've glamorized success because of all the accolades and the Tony Awards and the Oscar Awards and the World Cup trophies and all of the shiny things. But the hard work and the cohesion and the trust in the collective, that's really what brings people to the forefront, yeah? So there's another pattern here that I find incredibly interesting. I think that the most valuable work on really successful, really great teams isn't visible. I think it's beyond the visible radar. So if you think about it, nobody's going to give the headlines to the defender who stayed super disciplined for 90 minutes, right? But without them, a lot of goals would have gone in. And nobody interviews the player who quietly covered someone else's mistake. Or we don't remember the runner who pulled two defenders away and then created that space so somebody else could eventually use it. So those things don't make the highlight reels, right? They're not the ones that people are talking about. But without them, those highlights will never happen. And I'm going to just draw the same parallel. The same thing happens in organizations. I've seen that throughout my career, and also in families and my work with families, that sometimes the person that everyone applauds and is standing and is most seen and acknowledged, they're literally standing on the shoulders of 10 other people that nobody talked about, or of family members that no one really pays attention to. And those 10 people often don't mind. they are aware of their role in bringing the entire group forward like that. Yeah, they're committed to the mission, to what they have agreed we were going to do together. And they're not looking for the applause. So one of my guiding principles has become that the strongest teams are not made up of stars. They're made up of individuals who understand their role in someone else's success and in the group's success. That they don't see each success as an individual belonging to one person, but that it's a collective and one person is standing for that. And that's a completely different way of thinking about leadership. And that raises another question. So if teamwork is this powerful, which I think it is, why is it so uncommon? Like, why is that not what's being taught? Why is that not what the trainings are about in all the organizations? Why is that not really the buzzword? And I don't think it's because people are selfish. I think it's much more subtle than that. Most of us just actually want to know that what we've contributed mattered. We want to be seen. We want to feel that we have value and that we bring that to the table. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everything is right about that. So being recognized is really a human need. However, something shifts when getting that recognition becomes the focal point, right? So we want to be seen. We want our contribution to be acknowledged. But if that becomes what we're working for, we've lost the whole reason that we're in the game in the first place. So then people start protecting themselves, or they become territorial about their ideas. And if they make a mistake, it is seen as more risky because, boy, that could really topple my recognition. And they start competing for getting credit for things. So that whole collaborative energy starts to disappear, if it even exists in the beginning. So if you watch Norway, you're not going to see that. I certainly didn't see it in the game yesterday. Nobody looked particularly interested in becoming the story. And even Haaland, when he scored, he just kind of looked at his teammates. He's like, man, is this not cool? There was no chest pounding at all. And everyone on the team looked like they were committed to that happening. And that's a profoundly different mindset. And it's unfortunately surprisingly rare. And one thing I really admired after the match was how quickly all those players turned the conversation back toward the team. Yeah? Yes, Haaland scored twice. Everyone got that. But those same players were also talking about Nyland's penalty save, about the defense, right? And how they were, and about the tactical adjustments made by the coaches, about those players who came off the bench, who came in. So the people inside a team like that, that's really great. It's because they understand something that I think our media-frenzied world has forgotten. And that is that individual brilliance does not happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen in isolation. Yeah? It grows inside that collective trust. And maybe that's one reason that the really best performers are so surprisingly humble, because they know that. They know exactly how many hands, unseen, uncelebrated, went into creating the moment. So, years from now, people are going to maybe talk about this match and they're going to remember Erling Haaland. And honestly, totally makes sense. I mean, it was amazing. One of the sportscasters says, when you watch soccer, sometimes you see things that you really can't believe you've just seen. I mean, that kind of captures it. And the goals are memorable. Not questioning that. But from my perspective, Norway didn't beat Brazil because they happened to have the best player or players on the field. They beat Brazil because for 90 minutes plus, they looked like the better team. They played like the better team. And I think that's the real lesson here. Because every successful organization, every successful and thriving family, every successful entrepreneurship reaches a moment where one person can stand in the spotlight and get the award, or they give the presentation, or they stand at the dinner and talk, speak to the family. Someone signs the deal or scores the goal in this case, right? But the question isn't who gets the credit. It's really, did everyone else create the conditions for that one person to be standing out front? And they do. And so when they do, really remarkable things happen. And that's what Norway demonstrated in that game. And to me, that's the story behind this World Cup upset. Like, it's huge. I mean, Brazil's an amazing team. They have dominated for decades, really. And for Norway to come up this way, and they earned it. So if we look at leadership, if we look at self-leadership, teamwork, our families, and human behavior, and we organize it around that collective trust, wow, just imagine what differences we'd have in all those different areas. So if this kind of content resonates with you, I'd love to have you subscribe to the channel. You'll know when new content comes out. And I'd really appreciate you sharing your comments and your thoughts. And I read through them, and I love to hear from you. All right. Thanks for listening. And until next time, be well.